So let me do this. I'm going to just share. Well, just actually let me first ask everybody to just help me with a quick question, uh, and then I'll share a slide with you. Um, so perhaps for all the colleagues on the line, if you would humor me, um, if you don't mind, just writing down these three questions, and I'd like to just perhaps you can enlighten me when we get to the end of the presentation, and we'll look for some answers and we can share and compare our views. But the first question is, I'd like to know what is lacking in today's most visible leadership role models. So if you don't mind writing the question down, what is lacking in today's most visible leadership role models? What is lacking in today's most visible leadership role models? And then the second question is, what's the difference between character and reputation? This idea that uh, Keegan, who is an academic that I'm very fond of, he's a psychologist. And he wrote two books. This is the one called The Evolving Self. He's written other stuff, lots of journal articles and so on, as you would expect. But he wrote another book called In Over Our Heads, which kind of implies it's a reflective about human development, and the extent to which humans are maybe sometimes too for their own good, but that development relates amplified ambition, and I like that very much. I'm a very big fan of this concept, and perhaps you'll indulge me just for a moment to say that at Stellenbosch Business School, I was very privileged in the last couple of weeks to open up a number of different courses: the MBA program, the MPhil in leadership, the MPhil in development finance, and so on. Um, and our PhD program, sorry, as well. And in each case, I mentioned Robert Keegan's work because I think it's really important in a learning context to think about human development and the processes that attach to human development. And I talk when I speak to our students, I talk a lot about what character means, and I distinguish, as David Brooks does, I distinguish between performance character on the one hand and moral character on the other hand. And I think these things relate to leadership in a way which, if we get a chance, I'll come back to. But let's just quickly talk about Robert Keegan's kind of central thesis. This came about a couple of years ago, for the first time. In order to do this, I'm just going to stop sharing for a second, so that I can see all of you, and see if we need to react to anything. Just Robert Keegan's idea is that for the longest time in psychology, um, there was all the research that was done about human development was done strictly in infants, so babies, and then the next kind of layer was children, their sort of developmental elements, and then adolescents, and it was anchored to physical development. So by the time somebody was considered to be physically mature, so let's say in their mid-20s to late 20s, their brain development, that they stopped studying brain development at that point. And the different components of the development of psychology was kind of linked to that. And then he points out that in the last 100 to 150 years, the average life expectancy meant that whereas 100 years ago, maybe the maximum life expectancy would be kind of the early to mid 50s, now people live much longer and the average life expectancy is closer to 65 plus. And so what is happening is in human development terms and in psychological development terms is that we have a longer run at these developmental stages. And so he came up with this idea of a kind of a hierarchy of development, and it's a hierarchy rather than discrete different sub-elements. And the picture looks like this. So if you'll bear with me, I'll just walk you through the different parts of it. So on the left-hand side, we have, let's see if I can get this to work. We have what he calls the impulsive or the infant mind. And I'll come back and explain what that means. Then we have what's called the adolescent mind. Sometimes people will we'll call it something else. The imperial mind is another bit of language used. The socialized mind, which is in the middle there. Then the self-authoring mind. And then beyond that, the self-transforming mind. Now, let me tell you that when I first offered this title to Professor Madola, he got very excited because I suspect that in his mind, he was thinking I was talking about transformation. The mindset hierarchy is this idea of a self-transforming mind. And initially I thought, actually, I must get in touch and I must say, I'm not talking necessarily about transformation as in the way that we think about it in South Africa. But then I thought, actually, transformation, a fantastic case study to use in the context of Keegan's work. It actually a very nice, helpful leadership conundrum to look at through this lens. So I shall try to make the case for why that is. So let me just explain what different mindsets are. So the infant mind, very simple, is literally when we are toddlers, babies, very young, we have a way of thinking, which is demonstrated by, for example, if you go to a very small kid and you put something, you put a page in front of your face, it causes them to panic. Some children, not everybody, some children, it causes them to panic. And the reason is they think you have disappeared. So they have their world is very literal. And so their mindset is not developed yet to a point where they realize that the fact that they can't see your face doesn't mean you're not there anymore. And so he describes that in that particular way. The adolescent mind, anybody who has teenagers will recognize the adolescent mind. So in the case of a teenager, I mean, one of the examples he gives is that he says, if you have a 12-year-old son, for example, or a 12-year-old nephew, you will recognize the adolescent mindset because they might say to you, look, I love you very much. Just talking to their parent or to somebody else. I love you very much, but I would sell you in a heartbeat if it meant I could get a Coke, for example. So they have a very self-centered view of the world, and they think in a very particular way that is also quite literal, but they can make connections. So, for example, an adolescent that is on probation, for example, for a crime, if they don't commit the crime and their social worker says, why did you not commit the crime? They will say, well, you need to be proud of me because I thought it through and I realized because I'm on probation, if I committed the crime and I got caught, I'll have to go back to jail. Instead of thinking, it's not acceptable that I steal somebody's car or I steal something from somebody else. They just think about the consequences. So it's a very literal connection to consequences rather than to the right and wrong of what they're doing. That's the adolescent mind. The socialized mind is so actually let me just go a step back. Maybe this also helps. If I put myself back in my stage, I was an adolescent. For example, I was on a farm, and for example, if I saw a sheep in a field and I had a catapult, I would think nothing of seeing whether I could hit sheep with a catapult. Not to try and kill it, but just for target practice, you know. And if my father caught me, obviously he'd be outraged, and it's just that sort of selfish, thoughtless act that boys do in that sort of stage, and all adolescents have something similar, in that they behave in that way. Um, and then as I get older, I realize actually in the community, the farming community and the society that we live in, shooting an animal with a catapult is not, unless you're hunting birds or something for a reason, it's actually not an acceptable social norm. So, and even less, trying to harm somebody else with a catapult. The socialized mind is okay. So the socialized mind is where we have norms that are culturally accepted. We are shaped by the authority of the grouping in the socialized mind. So all of those people that are there tend to shape us. If we do an induction at work of a new work member, we talk about our values and our beliefs and our vision and our mission and purpose that we have in the organization. All of those things are socializing that new worker into our environment. And and as a result, hopefully over time, they feel that they can interact comfortably with people in the socialized mind. They can contribute in a positive way. They can be a member of a team. They might be able to lead a team inside of the socialized mind, but they are inducted and onboarded in a way that makes them ultimately feel like they belong. And they belong. And in psychology, they talk about a tribe. They don't mean it in a cultural sense, they mean it in a collective sense. So we become part of a tribe in the socialized mind. Now, these first three, the impulsive mind, the adolescent mind, and the socialized mind, if you go back 100 years, and if you look in the if you go back even as little as 50 years, Keegan is that that was all the research done was in these impulsive mind, because people think there was much and of the minds that we started to, as globally, these are people on the planet to 7 billion people on the 60s. Now suddenly in the hierarchy, it became evident that actually people's development went beyond the social. The piece that's beyond is when you start thinking to yourself, in my own culture, or in my own workplace, or in my own whatever as you belong to, there are things that I'm not, things that maybe I look at the system and I look at the norms and I look say, I'm not sure that's quite the way that it should be. Maybe I should start to influence an alternative. And I go from being authored, which is the socialized mind, the membership of the socialized mind authors me. They create me as a social being inside that environment. I go from that to being in the self-authoring mind, where now I'm looking at a blank sheet of paper and I'm looking at the system. I'm saying, I need to author alternatives to what is there. I need to have my own identity in terms of the mindset that I use to make sense of the world around me. I need to have independence and autonomy of my direction, my purpose, my beliefs. And what's more, I need to start to try to influence the socialized environment so that it can recognize that it's not perfect and that there are opportunities for it to evolve further. Um, and this is a tricky thing because people who are in that culture, and again, I use the word culture in a logical sense rather than in any other way. Um, they feel triggered by the fact that they are comfortable with the way things are currently done. So change in an organization, for example, if you're leading change, you might recognize that if we just keep doing what we've been doing in our organization, we're going to lose our clients, or we're going to lose our mandate, or we're going to lose the franchise that we've been given, or the or whatever it is that's the source of value. You recognize that in the organization as a leader in this self-authoring space, you recognize we need to pivot and do something different in order to be able to sustain the value that we create in whichever field we are in. And the problem is that in the socialized mind, that group of people are triggered, is the expression that is used. But if I was to be blunt, I could say they could be anything, including offended by the fact that you are now stepping into that space and starting to change what they are comfortable with. And if you think about change, that's exactly what happens. You go and you say, I need to change the reporting lines, or I need to change the job description, or these jobs are no longer relevant to what our clients need, and these jobs are more important, and we need to recruit those people and potentially retrain and redeploy these people, and so on. So the self-authoring mind has this kind of dark side that mirrors it, where on the one hand it's empowering and it's important from a developmental point of view because it means you start to think for yourself, and literally that does what it says on the label. You are starting to author your own mindset, and as a leader, it's a very important thing to do. Now, Keegan's point here is he's saying if it wasn't for the fact that there are more of us with more complex issues, and if it wasn't for the fact that we are living longer, we would not actually even get into this space of self-authoring because we never needed such complex processing mechanisms, and we never lived long enough to be able to do that. So it's quite an important way of looking at things. And then if you live long enough, and if you are able to understand the mechanism of moving from left to right through these different mindsets, you could ultimately get to the point where you have what's called a self-transforming mind. And this is there are very, very few people who can attain this level. I would call it a level of enlightenment, and I know that invokes almost a spiritual kind of religious tone, and I again, maybe that's appropriate, is that the self-transforming mind is where you can look at the system of the self-authoring mind, and you can look at your own system of self-authoring, and you can switch yourself from being the subject of that system to looking at it as if it's an object. In other words, you put it at arm's length and you objectify your own system and you compare it to other systems that are out there. So you're looking at multiple systems and you are comparing them. Reconcile these different systems, but where they are incompatible, you can live with the ambiguity and the uncertainty and the instability of the fact that these differences are not with each other, or that one is not a perfect world. So for example, if I was to do a religious thing, we might say we would look at the Jewish way of life and the Muslim way of life and the non-believer's way of life and the Christian way of life, and we can understand those different systems. They all can coexist because our mindset is being self-transforming and is tolerant of that kind of situation. Really, probably a bad example to use here because it doesn't really the complexity I'm talking about here. Now, the thing that should interest you as a leader is three things. The why we've spoken about, which is we live longer, there's more of us, and there's more complex problems. That's the answer to the question, why does this happen? The second thing is how many people, what portion of the working population sits in each of these mindsets? And the third thing is, what is the mechanism by which we move from one mindset to another? So how do I develop myself around me so that I can move from one mindset to another? So here's the data. This varies depending on where you look. But what is interesting is that roughly 6% of people who are adults in the working population are still in the adolescent mindset. And I'm going to pause just for a second to make this point to you. The problem that you therefore need to reconcile yourself with is that in your workforce, amongst your peers, in people around you who are physically mature, you will have a small proportion, 6%, who still have a very singular, literal, self-serving mindset. And and so in the workplace, for example, you might find people who behave in a way that you can't really understand. You'd sort of think, you might actually say, this person behaves like a juvenile, this is a grown man or woman and they behave like they're a teenager. What is going on? Well, the fact is they evolve in the way that the balance of the population have. There's a big proportion where we all have understandings of the norms and the ethics with each other in the workplace. We can make things happen. We can work in teams. We can follow. We can lead. We understand the rules. We have shared values and so on. And then you get 35% of adults who have managed to transition, to evolve in terms to a very small proportion who have transitioned to the self-transforming mind. And I am, in some ways, as I get older, I get happier with his idea that you have to be older in order to get further to the right, because it suggests that you have to have had more experience, potentially can move more to the right. In the case of our students, what we're trying to do is to try and find devices that help them to accelerate the process from left to right in their learning. Leader, what you want to do is you want to use those same devices to help yourself to move from left to right and to try and accelerate that so that you don't have to wait until you are ancient so that you have the wisdom of the gurus. So you are able to move from left to right. Now, the difference between comfort zone and stretch and snap is the thing that the leader has to try and manage. Snap being we just push too far. People and you have to have a very good understanding of extent to which you are stretching or pretending to snap people. I think what I'll do is I'll stop sharing. I'll stop sharing there, and if it's appropriate, we can maybe have a discussion. I'm so sorry about the line. This is typical. It's fine all day, and then as soon as we get to something important, then the line starts to not help us. If there are questions or observations, or if this resonates, insofar as you may have heard what I was saying there and could see it.
Thank you. Thanks very much,
I'll try
Professor.
putting my camera on, Prof Majola.
Yes, yeah. not do that,
Is that all right?
Prof.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, my professor. We understand, obviously, the network does this, but we got the little gist of the framework, which is very interesting. I see a comment there from Professor Gordon Zide. Any thought there, my professor? Maybe you want to go ahead, find this challenging. Over to you, Prof. Zide.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, my professor.
Yes,
Go
yes,
ahead.
we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Please go ahead.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Chris, this is a very, very important and most relevant topic, particularly in the times we're living in. You know, I say it's a challenging and a complex, but it reminds one of my studies, some decades ago, organizational and social psychology. At the time when I did the course at the University of Fort Hare, little did I know at the time that one day I would be rubbing shoulders with the likes of Professor Majola in leadership. But what I find very interesting is that as you move towards the very last phase, of leadership, particularly the self-transformative mind, the population becomes smaller and smaller, and we have 1% of adults in that kind of paradigm. Now, the question which I would like to put to you, if you don't mind, Professor, is apart from the longevity of people, what could be the other factors which lead to the diminishing size of the population as one leads towards the elderly and the more matured way of looking at things? I hope it makes a lot of sense. And also, greetings to Stellenbosch. That's my hometown. We've got a house in Kayamandi. We've got a house in Kayamandi. My dad used to
Thank
work
you.
at Darkbeard.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, that's where I end, Prof. Majola. Thanks, Chris.
All right, excellent. So just say, I think the question is, why is it that we don't have challenges that are more towards the transformative mind? We don't test ourselves. We're not prepared to step into that level of a challenge. And let me tell you, I thought that a great example in South Africa, and so I don't know that everybody on the call is from South Africa. We might be from other places on the continent, but if you'll forgive me for using South Africa as an example, is that in South Africa, transformation is one of those topic areas where you have different sets of perspectives, and these are competing with each other. And in the transformative mind, you need to reconcile those irreconcilable points of view. So you've got people who say BEE and transformation is absolutely central to our social development. And you've got other people who say BEE and transformation is discriminatory and it's repeating what happened during it. So you have these points of view. And the questions that the reality that we face, and perhaps if I go back to the questions I asked you at the beginning, highly visible role models, politicians are highly visible role models. And I think our politicians, sometimes they are willfully in the socialized mindset. So they choose a side of the argument and they think that that's where the votes come from. They recognize that people in the socialized mind are triggered and offended if we self-author in a way which provides autonomy of our thinking and so on. And then, and that's true, so for example, if you're a member of a right-wing clan or a left-wing clan, you're never going to come together because it suits your narrative and it suits your constituency and the votes you're going to get to stay doggedly in your own camp. And the transformative mind demands of leaders that they find a path to navigate despite there being different points of view in those camps. And our politicians are perhaps not the best role models of how that can be done. And by the way, I mean, we don't have to look at our politicians. We can look elsewhere for where this there are examples of this, I think. So I hope that that answers the question and that you got the gist of that despite the terrible network.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Thank you very much. The next one will be Sislindela Jabavu. But before I take Sislindela, just to acknowledge that with great respect and humility, that in the call we have our Deputy Minister of Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, Usiswa Munomalungelo Gina. She's with so Sister Malungelo, I'm sorry, but I'm not trying to expose you, but just to respect you, my sister. She's with you.
No, I mean, so thanks, Prof. Majola. Let me say, I mean no disrespect
no.
But I do think that you will find examples of what I am describing. You know, and I said the most visible leaders in our society, and it is the case that that's for the most part the most visible are our politicians. So I mean no disrespect, madam. Sorry.
No, thank you very much, Prof.
No problem.
I'm just following the discussion. I'm enjoying it. Let us be free. I'm also at liberty to come up with so many examples, Prof. Really, I'm not taking any offense on it. This is a very open discussion. That is, we're all open-minded here. Really, I'm really enjoying the discussion moving forward.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for the acknowledgement, Prof. Thank you so much.
Thanks, my sister. And really, as I said, I was just acknowledging her. She's a scholar. She's here as one of us. So there was no disrespect anywhere there, Prof. Chris. So please feel free. Thank you so much, Sis Linda. Over to you, my sister.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much, Prof, for a very, very insightful presentation. It's a pity that technology is failing us, but I think we got the gist of your presentation, and I'm sure Prof Majola will share it with us. So my question, I think it's a question and a comment at the same time. You mentioned that only 1% of the population of leaders is at the highest level. I think you said transformative level.
Correct.
And what takes them there are exposure to worthy challenges,
Yes.
which I think makes a lot of sense. And those worthy challenges prepare them to be able to handle complex issues. Issues that don't have a black or white answer. So they are gray answers. Complexity is such that they need to think beyond black and white. And that I take. So my question, or rather my comment is, now that millennials are getting into leadership, I think a number of millennials are in top executive leadership positions right now.
Yes.
And so I would like you to comment on the different generations. I know my generation, and I'm going to expose my age here. We had worthy challenges, including fighting the previous system of government.
Yes.
So that was a worthy challenge. Millennials, I'm sure they had their own worthy challenges. But you also hear now with the younger generation, your Generation Z, you hear things like quiet quitting. They give up too easily. And these now are our children and maybe the generation that is younger who might not have gone through the way yes, there are challenges, different challenges, but you also spoke about if we don't expose leaders to these challenges, then they won't grow. So are there any trends that you are picking up in terms of the growth? Because I don't think you are saying this progression is in terms of age. I think maturity comes with exposure to these worthy challenges, whether you are young or old.
Yes,
So
that is true.
Yes, I just wanted to hear your comment if there are any trends that we are picking up, and is there anything we can do to sort of fast track? I think you spoke about that, the level of development of our leaders. It's a long question. I hope I'm making sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sis
So
Lindiwe.
before that, I also realized that there are other challenges, complex challenges, even for the younger generation. Climate change is one of them. Unemployment is one of them. The global political space is very challenging right now. You know, if you look at America and other countries, even the DRC. So I'm not underestimating the challenges that the younger generation is faced with. But I'm just trying to think whether is there anything more we can do to help our leaders to mature.
You know, do you know your point? Your point is well made and well taken. And the thing that activates me is that I read the researcher Carol Dweck, Dweck. I read her book called Mindset. Oh, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I really paid close attention to chapter 7 and I think chapter 8 of that book well after I had finished doing the majority of my parenting. My two girls were already grown up and kind of on their way. And I regret that because she talks about the difference between a static and a growth mindset, and it dovetails beautifully with Robert Keegan's work, and he's much more familiar. Carol Dweck's work is much more familiar to us, this notion of a growth mindset. And honestly, I commend it to you. I won't pretend to try and lay it out here because we don't have the time. The clock's against us a bit, but I do think that for those people that are the parents of children that are in that phase, in the kind of the most recent phase. And I'll just give you one example from what she talks about. It's the difference between when you praise a child that when I was a child, praise was very, very hard to find. It was, and I mean, we all do that. The older we get, we forget how much praise was heaped on us when we were younger. But let's just assume my thesis is right. But when you praise a child and you say, "Oh, you are so clever," you know, it's just the sort of the praise is very final and complimentary and always positive and so on. And we take our lives in our hands, we think, if we don't say things that are very positive rather than necessarily constructive. And Carol Dweck talks about praising. You can still praise, but what you need to praise is the hard work that they did to achieve what it is that you are pleased with. So you're praising their process rather than the outcome. And the thing about that is it works whether they have failed or whether they've succeeded, is that you praise the fact that they put in the hours, they tried really hard. Maybe they fell short, but they are within reach of being at a better place. I like your comment very much about different sets of challenges as we move through time. And so the younger generation now have challenges that maybe we wouldn't recognize. I mean, when we were youngsters, or certainly when I was, there wasn't even any television to watch, never mind mobile phones and laptops and all this kind of stuff. So we had a different orientation and completely different challenges. But I do think that every generation will have what they would consider to be their challenge set. What we've got to do is, as the the more mature or the older generation is just not make the mistake of making it too cushy. And I don't mean be abusive. I don't mean be negative and horrible. I don't mean be exclusionary and not embracing people, but be a little bit more thoughtful about the type of challenges that you put in people's way. If kids can become can do outdoor activities and can be leaders in, for example, a captain in a sports team all of those things are things that are worthy challenges that build them up and eventually form part of a track record of leadership delivery, which I think is incredibly important. It takes a long time to build a track record of leadership. And so they've got to lean into those things that most people would prefer to not go near. And if I circle back to what I was talking about earlier about our students, I say to them, the person who wins in the learning game is not the person who finds a workaround or can find a way to game the system. The person who wins is the person who leans into a very difficult challenge and takes it on because they are stretching themselves in a way which means what comes into that system is improved by the challenge. And so what comes out is potentially a stronger leader. And I feel really strongly about this. I think it's so important rather than just, we think we're clever because we found a workaround or we found a way to game the system. The fact that all of you are here this evening and have stuck with us despite the fact that the technology is so terrible is testimony to a mindset. It's testimony to a way of thinking. It's testimony to a leadership behavior, which I think, and by the way, I have watched Prof. Majola very kindly sent me a couple of the sessions that you've had before, and I was absolutely blown away because you do this on a voluntary basis. It's a process of development and of leaning into what are the challenges we face and trying to find solutions in a collective. I think it's absolutely brilliant. So I hope that answers your questions, Lindilwe.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see a comment there from Dr. Gule, but there's a question as well. And the question there, Prophet says, it's interesting to see the people who run the world, the majority, age-wise, are chronologically advanced in years and should be models of being advanced on transformative mind. Current affairs are a witness and confirmation of the adolescent state. Any comments, Prof? You can just comment. I don't know if maybe it's been kicked out. Yeah, go ahead.
What a lovely, that's a lovely question and comment. Yeah, I mean, it is very interesting. I said in the transformative mind, Keegan talks about the fact that leaders self-authoring mind are learning to lead. In the transformative mind, they take on leadership roles in order to learn. It's the opposite. So here in the self-authoring mind, we're learning to lead. In the transforming mind, we're leading in order to learn. It's a different orientation. And I think that that the combination of a willingness to contribute back to society as you mature, and age is not a factor, I think that point as well. As you mature in your leadership journey, your willingness to make a contribution and your willingness to lean into complex, difficult leadership challenges and step out of your comfort zone deliberately yourself is something you see from people who are typically chronologically advanced in years, etc. Because I think you start to realize that your growth of your own mindset and your ability to make a contribution cannot happen unless you lean into these challenges. And I mean, our country is an absolutely wonderful place to be for that very reason. We've got challenges that a lot of people just say, okay, I can't do this. I'll just have to stay in my own lane, do my own thing, not talk to anybody about it. I'm not challenging, I'm not pushing back, and so on. People who are real leaders lean into the complex challenges in a way that's it's very nurturing and very helpful for our society. I do think, though, that I need to just choose my words carefully here, but I do think we will find in some of the examples that Dr. Guli was talking about there, people who are somewhat mischievous in the approach that they take. So their agenda is not necessarily one that is driven by integrity. And where that is the case, we have a problem. So if you have people that have got, it's the old Buffett thing. If you've got people that are intelligent and energetic, you better hope that they are also filled with integrity. Because if they have the first two and not the last one.
Thank you, Prof. We can see that we are really struggling there. Maybe the last question, if I may just ask you. So my background is systems thinking, Prof. Chris. As you know, systems thinking more will be about interdependence, interconnectedness, and nonlinear theories and all that stuff. So in this framework, is it a linear approach that, for instance, you've got to start with impulsive mind before you proceed to adolescent, and that you cannot do socialized without adolescent, or you cannot self-authoring and go back to adolescent in that non-linear way?
That's a brilliant observation. So Keegan is very he's been challenged on, because people that are in that domain of research, like for example, a very famous psychologist in that field is Ken Wilber, has said that the adult development psychologists have circled the wagons, and they've got this thing about a hierarchy, and a hierarchy is offensive in the modern era. We can't have hierarchies. We can have Myers-Briggs indicators. So we can be introvert or extrovert, and we don't mind that system, because things one's not better than the other, they're different. And he says, look, whether we like it or not, we are judgmental. So if you can honestly say that you don't look at an exchange between colleagues at work that don't go as well as it could, or you look at how somebody drives, or you look at how somebody teaches a class, you look at how somebody runs a team, or any situation, and you can honestly say, I look at what they are doing and I never feel like there might be a better way. If you can honestly say that, just, if you feel that you can honestly say that you're not judgmental of situations that you see, by which I mean you feel that they could be improved in some way, then the idea of a non-hierarchical development process makes sense, but otherwise not. Hierarchy in this particular system is an absolutely critical component. So yes, it is linear. Yes, the one is embedded in the other. You have to build up through each layer, and you take the subordinate layer with you as you. So it's concentric circles. It's building a richer mindset as you get more towards the right of the model. That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. So I was just asking Professor Zide to thank the speaker, and then we'll close after this. You've really given us a very wonderful framework here, albeit your network challenges, but thank you so much. My professor, over to you. This was very good, Prof. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think, colleagues, it would be quite appropriate to, first of all, start thanking, expressing our gratitude to Prof. Majola, for always choosing the best speakers and who know exactly what to say and how to say it. And so, Prof. Majola, indeed, we really want to thank you, my brother, because it is not really an easy task to identify good speakers, but you have done us very proud, for the last 3 years. So thank you very much. Let me come now to Prof. Chris. Chris, well done, my brother. you know, when indeed the topic was posted, I was one of those who thought that we were going to talk about transformational leadership. But as you engaged with the topic and you raised the number of mindsets, that's when I said, wow, my goodness me, this is so appropriate, particularly in leadership. You know, as we grow and develop in leadership, we have to appreciate and understand what shapes our leadership mindsets. That you have done, you know, starting from when we were babies up until the stage where we are. But that can easily be translated in the leadership odyssey, because if one does not understand the leadership odyssey, where it starts, how it develops, and where we are now, one would probably be short-sighted about your topic. But it is very, very appropriate, Chris. And also, you know, the practical examples which you have given make a lot of sense, because it's a pity that, you know, technology failed us, but evidently you will be able to share the presentation with Prof Majola. And if I were to be bold enough, would be to say, once, I don't know when, once the load shedding challenges, I did not know that, you know, Western Cape does have load shedding challenges. I thought it was probably us in Gauteng, but nonetheless, once load shedding is over, I think it would be in the best interest of this platform if we were to call you back to finish what you have done, because we could just get the snippets of your presentation. But in deeper thinking and thought, I think there is a lot that we have learned from you, Chris. And on a very personal note, if you one of these days go to Hayes Fesser Kos Hayes, you would discover that the Hayes Kos Hayes has been named after my dad. You know, he worked there for over 50 years. And when I resigned from Forte, he was angry with me. But nonetheless, that's on a personal note. But over and above that, colleagues, also thank you very much for your attending. This is one of those platforms which you really gain experience in addition to what one is doing in whatever capacity of leadership one is placed at. And so you are in a good space. And those who are joining us for the first time, please do spread the gospel, that as our Prof Majola indicated, every Wednesday at 6, we are here. We are a platform of leaders and scholars. And so please do join us. In fact, Prof Majola, there was another invitation which I received for 6 o'clock. And I said, no, I'm sorry, colleagues. I have an engagement which I cannot miss. And so, yes, thank you very much, my professor. And thank you very much, Chris, and everybody. Thank you. Over back to you, my professor.
And thank you to you, my professor. Thanks very much indeed. There's no way you'll attend these sessions and you'll remain the same. You'll always be empowered. These are master classes, and we do appreciate the colleagues who've attended. And please do come back again. And I do agree with you, my professor, that we must really get Prof. Chris to come back. Sometimes we'll just see his schedule, and so we'll have to assess his schedule and the load shedding schedule so that we are trying to make sure that he's really out of the problem. And I see Bridget there seconding that Chris must come back. My brother there, Dr. Paul Houdi, thank you. It says, thank you very much, practical approach. Thanks, Doc. To everyone, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. As we have said, we meet every Wednesdays. Let's come back again next week, Wednesday, for another good session with a good speaker, with a good topic. The session is adjourned now until next week, Wednesday. May God bless you and may God bless Africa. Thank you very much and goodbye.